Щось чули? Знову ехав. Ні.
Ми знову чуємо самих себе. Знову чуємо самих себе. Це дуже дискомфортно. Так працювати неможливо. Ми знову чуємо самих себе. Почуй мене.
Hello, my name is Anthelme Vidaud, and I'm happy to introduce a new session of Tête-à-Tête, a series of talks in the frame of Docudays UA Film Festival. And I'm very pleased to welcome the great Polish filmmaker Agnieszka Holland. Hello, Agnieszka.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Thank you very much for joining us for this Tête-à-Tête. I'm sure that the Ukrainian audience is already familiar with your work. Among many important films you directed, Provincial Actors, Europa, Mr. Jones, which is one of your latest films co-produced with Ukraine about the Ukrainian history. And today you are here with us not only as a director, but also as a curator to talk of a special program that you have created specially for Docudays UA. It's a retrospective of Krzysztof Kieślowski's documentaries, composed of 12 films shot between 1969 and 1980. And the program is called Krzysztof Kieślowski, a documentary biography. It's extremely interesting to discover these films because, as far as I'm concerned, I knew only Kieślowski's fiction films, such as Decalogue, Double Life of Veronique, Three Colors Trilogy. And I did not know that before becoming this internationally recognized director that we all know, he was famous in Poland as a documentary filmmaker. Before starting with the questions, I just have two short reminders to those who are watching us. First, you can watch the retrospective on docuspace.org. Actually, 12 of the 12 movies are already there. You can already watch them. And the two other ones, First Love and Photograph, will be shown offline in Docudays when the lockdown will be over in Kyiv, hopefully soon. And the second thing is you can ask your questions to Agnieszka on the Facebook page of the festival, the YouTube channel of the festival, and on DocuSpace. And I will pass them to Agnieszka at the end of this session. So the first question, Agnieszka, is could you tell us a bit about the beginning? How was the idea for this program conceived? Is it something that you had in mind for some time? Yeah, can you tell us about that?
Actually, it wasn't my idea. I was approached by a Polish Institute of Adam Mickiewicz, who I think is helping the festival with the program. And somebody had the idea, to honor Kieślowski this year, because it's also his 80th anniversary, if he would be alive, which not for a long time already. But in the same time, not being alive for such a long time, he's very alive in the mind of people, in the memory, and also for the new generations of the film buffs and filmmakers. And in any film school in the world or at any festival, I have the occasion to meet the young audience and especially filmmakers. Everybody, it means a lot of them know Kieślowski's and not only know him, but consider as one of the most important source of inspiration. And you've been right, they know especially his international films. It means starting Decalogue, which was his Polish TV series and very original, refreshing somehow TV series, which prefigurated, I think, the fate in the TV series, that it can be something much better and much more than just, telenovelas or usual procedural series you've been used to. It's his philosophical statement a bit. And two of the Decalogue parts have also long future versions. Short film about love and short film about killing. And especially the short film about killing, it was the start of the international fame for Krzysztof. It was shown in Cannes Film Festival, was considered something very, provocative and very powerful, and somehow triggered the interest in him and helped him to find the producers and the financing for Double Life of Veronique and after for Three Colors. But I really love his Polish films, not only documentaries you will be seeing here, but also two television films, two feature television films he did, The Calm and The Personnel. Mm-hmm. Really very powerful and lovely and very modern films, actually influenced by his documentary work much more than this international, more conceptual work of him. And Camera Buff, which still it's influenced by the documentaries. And finally, Blind Chance, which is to me one of his best and most intriguing films. And that is the beginning of this conceptual work a bit, when he tries to not to just describe realistically what you can see outside of the windows, but also, or inside in the apartments, but also to give to that some philosophical perspective, existential perspective. So it's a lot to watch, and for me, I remember his documentaries. I haven't seen some of them, 2 or 3 I never seen actually, but And most of that I watched in the time when we met each other, when I graduated from the film school in Prague, in Czechoslovakia, and Krzysztof was already a few years after graduating from Lodz. And when I came back from Prague, the Polish colleagues have been, Lodz colleagues have been interested in my experience, also my political experience, because it was after the Prague Spring and the Soviet invasion, and I was in prison, and so it was a lot to talk. And I remember the first meeting. They've been probably 5 or 6 of them, all working in the documentary studio, all very interested and very inspired by the documentaries. And Krzysztof was one of them, probably the oldest, or one a bit, anyway, most serious. And he was silent most of the time. Mm-hmm. And when he finally opened the mouth, everybody turned toward him, and I understood he is the leader. He is somebody very important here. So when I had the occasion to see his movies, and after we became very close friends and been collaborating somehow, it means helping each other with their projects, scripts, editing, and so. Mm-hmm. I tried to watch it, and every time it was like very powerful point of view, and with very discreet filmmaking presence or narrative presence, but it's only on the surface. When you look closer, you see that his eye is practically in every single frame. So I think that his strength, his filmmaking strength, of his human, like tender kind of vision of the humanity is very visible in those documentaries.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back more in detail about the films that compose the retrospective. But in general, these films reveal a very interesting picture of the Poland of the 70s, which was a period of changes, a very particular period. Could you maybe explain a bit the social and political context in which these films were made? The Poland of the 70s.
You know, 60s in Poland, especially late 60s, have been pretty dark time, politically speaking and ideologically speaking. The leader of the Communist Party became more and more sclerotic and dogmatic. The economical situation was worse and worse. It was some battles inside of the Communist Party, and the growing communist version of the nationalism, which is in double way, I think, unpleasant. And in Poland, it expresses in the very strong anti-Semitism. And that it was the period when to find this scapegoat for their problems, they pointed at the last Jews remaining in Poland. It was several dozens, thousands, 30, 40,000 of Jews, or not even Jews, because most of those people have been mixed or not considering themselves as they're Jewish, who remained in Poland after the Second War and the waves of the immigration. And to understand what was the loss before the war, Jews have been more than 10% of the population in Poland. It means more than 3 million citizens. And anyway, it was such a witch hunt that most of them emigrated with one-way ticket. They lost the citizenship. They've been unable to come back. And officially they emigrated to Israel, but of course some of them went to Israel, but most of them went to different Western countries. And for some people it was pretty good, and for some it was the end of their whole life. So it was very tragic, dramatic, and shameful history for Poles, and in the same time it was the student kind of revolution against the censorship and against the condition and spiritual condition of the life under communism. So altogether created some generation. And generation, it was Kieślowski's generation. I'm younger than he in 10 years, but it was also my generation. And we've been this generation, the people who've been from 18 till 30 in 68, they had different view of the reality and of the communism and of the freedom. And in 70, it was this time workers' protest in Gdańsk and Gdynia, which was suppressed very cruelly by shooting over 100 workers. And that it was such a shock to the entire country that it triggered the change on the head of the Communist Party. The Gomułka, the old guy, went to the retirement, and like more modern and more moderated and more Western leader came. His name was Gierek, and this decade started in 71. And it was the first disillusion of Kieślowski's and his friend Tomasz Zygadło that it will be possible to make political documentaries, because they've been promised that they can make the documentation about this new situation, about the creation of workers' Soviets and the collaboration between trade unions and the workers' movement and the Communist Party and some, democratization and so. So they documented this period very, very closely. They created long feature documentary called Workers 70, and when it was ready, it was totally recut by the authorities and never released in the initial version. So they wanted to take their names off, but that it was impossible. It was some blackmail here. So the names are only in the line of the names together with the crew and everybody, but it was a shame. It means they've been ashamed, they've been very unhappy, they've been frustrated and felt to be naive and stupid to fall in this kind of the trap. And that it was, I think, for Krzysztof, very important lesson of the skepticism. And since then, he always tried to make his documentary in the way that even if somebody cuts something out, it will not change anything practically.
And because you just mentioned political cinema, some of the films that are in the retrospective are quite critical of the regime. It's very far from the propaganda image of a perfect socialist regime, of course. I'm thinking of The Bricklayer, for example, about a former activist of the Communist Party who resigns and tells in the film about his disillusion. I think this film in particular was partially censored. Were some of the films of the program that you chose censored as well? Did Kieślowski have problems in general with censorship?
Well, it was our strategy as well. It means it was this decade of 70s, the decade of relative democratization. It means we had the possibility to shoot much more than the generation before and to be more critical. And we always try to find the wise way, to be critical without being yeah. And sometimes we shot the things which we knew that it will be cut out by the censorship, but it was meant for that. On the hunt, you throw the rabbit that the dogs are going after him, and so and that was some kind of the game, which sometimes have been funny, sometimes they've been frustrating, and sometimes been very, very frustrating. And not only Kieślowski, it was also Marcel Łoziński, Tomasz Zygadło, and others. they had, all of them had the little library of the unreleased documentaries. And even sometimes it was few feature films, fiction films, which been released as well. My last Polish films also were put on, on the shelf for several years. So it was, we knew that it can happen. And of course, we fought for those imprisoned babies, but important was that it was made, and we tried to show it as much as possible in some kind of the semi-underground screenings and so on.
Despite these quite critical films, they were all produced by one studio, right? The WFD, Wytwórnia Filmów Dokumentalnych, which was obviously controlled by the
some first films have been produced by szka, I think, which was military studio.
But of course,
photo was probably that.
But all these studios were controlled by the regime, of course.
Yeah, sure.
And yet, despite of the critical point of view that can be seen in these films, paradoxically, they continued giving the means to Kieślowski to make his films in a way. Was it a part of the strategy of the so-called democratization, or how did it happen?
Well, it's a big difference between totalitarian and authoritarian regimes. Totalitarian regime just cut your head off and put you to the gulag, and authoritarian, has like the spaces between, the bricks. You can always sneak something, and they know it. And those people in the late communism in Poland, the rulers have been not the believers. They knew that it rots. They know that the system is like, they've been not ideologically consequent. And after it depended on the person, one minister of culture was relatively nice guy and allowed Wajda, for example, to shoot Men of Marble. And another was an asshole, and suddenly put the films which was just before being released on the ice. And the same in the Wytwórnia, in the studio, documentary studio. There have been some people who wanted those films to be made, and the impact of the documentary films, was minimal actually. Yeah. If the television were not showing them, they've been sent to some festivals eventually, and later only some of them had been released on the underground video or something like that. But in general, we've been like like the salesmen with the boxes of our films, going from one discussion club, film discussion club, to art house in some small city to another, and showing it to the people and discussing after, which was, in terms of numbers, probably those films have been not watched so much, but the impact was pretty big. Yeah. Yes, so it was something between the political and social work and the normal promotion. Nothing was really very, very consequent, so it was like that. In many directions in this period, when I was never doing documentaries, I was doing only fiction films. But with all the problems I had personally, even bigger than other guys because of my personal past, I consider this period as one of the most free and happy in my entire career. The rules of the censorship have been pretty clear. We knew how to navigate with that. Sometimes we lost, but we had the movies, we made.
And both you and Kieślowski were part of this trend, which was called the cinema of moral anxiety. which was basically between 1975 and 1981, I think, and alongside with Anthelme Vidaud, with Krzysztof Janussi and other filmmakers. Could you tell us maybe a bit what did it consist of, this cinema of moral anxiety?
Well, you know, the label was invented by the film critics, not by us. We didn't make the manifesto or something like that. It wasn't any kind of dogma. We just started to be interested in the reality and wanted to show the world which was not expressed in any way. Because, you know, the newspaper, it was some reportages. Some journalists who've been writing the reportages, like documentary pieces of, you know, of writing. They've been our allies, like, you know, the most famous was Ryszard Kapuściński or Hanna Kral, but it was actually many of them talented and courageous people who've been documented the reality. But we thought that documentary is one thing, but the fiction can make some kind of the synthetic view of what we consider the state of the society. And for me and for Krzysztof, it was always important to find also the existential dimension in that, not to just describe, you know, some problems, but to show the deeper impact of the, you know, of our life on the reality and the reality on our lives. And we predicted somehow, we felt before it happened, some crisis which was growing in the second part of the 70s, and the feeling that the society is like moving, that it's some kind of the underneath which seemed to be very quiet and very resigned, that it's some kind of the, you know, need, change, aspirations, and it exploded actually in August 80 with the strikes in the shipyard in Gdańsk, which created the movement of solidarity, which triggered somehow, you know, the big changes in this world behind the Iron Curtain. Mm-hmm. So we've been somehow, you know, premonitory to this movement as a filmmakers, and all those films have been, they've been different but had some similarities and been very warmly received by the audience. And again, we've been doing this, you know, travels from town to town, from city to city, from cinema to cinema, organizing the screenings and Q&A after, and discussing not only the movies but also exactly the situation with the audience. So it was, I think it had quite of the importance for exactly the mental change of the Polish citizens in late 70s.
And to continue with moral, there is a sense of moral in the way Kieślowski uses his camera in these 12 films. And you recall Kieślowski's words in the introductory text to the program that you wrote for Docudays. And it is, I quote, "By placing a camera in one place and not another, we are making a moral choice." I think this is very interesting. What is your take on that? Do you agree with, I mean, do you agree with that philosophy in cinema? And is it valid for documentary only or for cinema in general?
No. He was thinking altogether, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that it's right. It means I will not use the word moral maybe myself, because I was not so ready to use this term. But responsibility maybe is something which will be closer to the meaning of what he said. And it was, you know, somehow it was probably inspired by the technical reality. It means we had, because the economy in the communist countries have been totally fake, we've been able to shoot our films in pretty luxury way in terms of the shooting time, for example. It was possible to shoot the feature film in 40, 50, 60 days. It was like, okay. But the film, the pellicule, the material, the footage, have been very expensive because you had to buy it in dollars. It was not produced in communist countries, and where it was produced, like German Orwo film or Russian Soviet color, have been incompatible with any kind of the Western, standards. So our rate for the material was 1 to 4. 1 to 4 is nothing. Practically, you cannot do another take, and you cannot do the master shots. You cannot shoot from different angles everything, what is normal for American way of shooting, because you just don't have the means. So you have to think about not only every single shot, but the fragment of the scene you will cover in the close-up, and the piece of the scene you will cover from this angle, and so. It forced us to have the point of view immediately before we even started to shoot, and to make the choice. And every choice been quite dramatic, because if you shoot like that, you cannot shoot like that. It means it has to be reason why you shoot like that. So I think that it's why we've been not spoiled by this endless quantity of the possibilities. We've been very responsible for these technical things, but also it asks us the question, what is really important in the filmmaking, and what the point of view means. Mm-hmm. And what the responsibility of the point of view means.
It's really interesting. And talking about responsibility, I know that some of these films that go in the program are not 100% documentaries, meaning that some situations were played by actors or were scripted. I think this is the case of Curriculum Vitae, for example. Why do you think he did that? And yeah.
Well, I think that he was really interested in the insight of the, of the regular, ordinary Communist Party life. And I'm really sorry, but I have to. And it was impossible. It was impossible to to really document it. They will never allow anyone, especially somebody like Kosowski, to film the regular party meeting. And if they will agree, it will be the fake party meeting. They will, somehow pretend it for him. So he documented with, I think, one journalist. I don't remember who was the co-writer of this, but anyway, it was somebody with him. Who was documented, like, the protocols of several procès-verbal of several party meetings. And after they created the fake party meeting, but which was, extremely credible. It was like several party meetings, and they somehow invented this main character, this man whose curriculum vitae is, analyzed and judged, and he was played by some non-professional actor. I neither don't remember who was this guy, but he was, he was better than any professional actor would be, and I think that he had the experience of this kind of the things.
So in a way, it's very interesting, because in a way, by recreating this meeting with the means of fiction, he got a more truthful result than if it would have been filming a real meeting of the party, but with, of course, a reality completely faked, right?
Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yes. He used this, this text, this screenplay, after he rewrote it for the theater play, and it was played in an old theater in Krakow, one of the best Polish theaters. And it was very good, but it didn't have this incredible, truthfulness of course, of the film.
There is, in the retrospective, two films which form, I feel like a couple. It's Talking Heads and Seven Women of Different Ages, because these two films are quite different from the other ones. They are quite conceptual in their form. The first one, Talking Heads, asks people from 0 to 100 years old 2 questions. Who are you and what do you most wish for? And the second one, Seven Women of Different Ages, showing 7 different ballet dancers at different ages. Do you think we could say in a way that it's the first step of Kieślowski from realism towards metaphysics?
Yeah, metaphysics, yes. Anyway, some more philosophical approach to the reality, not only to describe the reality, to document, to catch the reality, but somehow construct it, to come with the totally new senses by superposing different situations and different ages, fitting one general concept. So somehow, I think it was premonitory for Blind Chance and Decalogue and Double Life of Veronique, and also Three Color, Blue, Red, White, where nothing was single. You always had some versions of the life. And here it was in very like simple way, something he after developed in his future films into something much more complex and having many layers.
And another film which I really liked, which struck me, it's The Photograph, where Kieślowski investigates on a picture of 2 children, picture taken at the end of World War II, and Kieślowski himself, by interrogating different people that might have known these 2 kids, is trying to find them 25 years after the picture was taken. And I think it's a fascinating thing because you have really a tension, a feeling of unexpected and change that you also can meet in his later fiction films. I don't know, maybe a few words about this one.
Well, this one, I think I watched for the first time. I heard about this film before, but I never watched it before, and it was for me the great discovery for many reasons. Why? Once, because it is fascinating, some kind of the detective story, like trying to reconstruct the memory and the past, and to come to the source of this moment. The photograph is something magical, you see the photo, and you try and you see everything behind. And for me, the photographs have been always a great inspiration, and for Kieślowski as well, much more than the paintings, even for the fiction films. I always collect a lot of photographs before, trying to find some story behind and some connection to my story. But also because it's only film when you can see himself. And it's one of his first films. I think that he was probably still in the film school or just after. And it is young Kieślowski. And he's not very nice, you see his personality. He's not somebody who will be very, smooth in like investigating people. He doesn't say, "Oh, please, lady, you look so great, or so cute," whatever. No, he goes.
He's a bit intrusive, even.
He's a bit intrusive, and he has, he has this like aim. He has to know, so he goes straight to the point. And actually, it's quite efficient, and I think it is efficient also because he was waking up some kind of the trust that the people believed that he's he's real, that it's something, you know, and he had some kind of natural authority as well. So what I described on the beginning of our conversation. So it is for me personally, it's, you know, very touching to see him before I met him in person, and in the same time it's all him somehow. But yeah, but the film is very interesting and also speaks a lot about this time. All those films from 70s are very connected to the particular period of the time. This one goes back to, you know, to just after the war feeling, and then you realize how close it was, you know. In 70 it was only 15 years since, you know, the Second World War. So those kids who've been then, I don't know, 10, are now 26, 27, young people still, you know. So it also like narrows the perspective, time perspective, that the war, it was not something, you know, like Napoleonian wars, but it's something, you know, which is in our memory, very close to our memories. And those, so anyway, those films, Kieślowski's documentaries are very evocative, and the feeling of the time, you know, the smell of the time, it's very present, but in the same time they are very modern in this probably transparent, you know, approach, and in the same time they are very precisely composed. It looks like the narrator is not there, but in reality, the narrator is very much present and has very strong point of view, artistic and philosophical.
And there is another film in the program that marked a turning point for Kieślowski, because he stopped at some point making documentary films. It's the film from a night porter's point of view. And as you write in your introductory text, I quote, the film got great reviews, won awards, people were laughing at the protagonist in cinemas, but Krzysztof felt horrible. What made him stop make documentary films?
You know, this main character, it is some kind of the satire, this film. It means, but at the same time, this man is a bit like invented by somebody. He is very, you know, he is like some kind of the communist fascist, somebody who loves to control people and who is proud of this little power he has and is ready to overuse this little power he has to the extreme. And in the same time, he's quite primitive. So what he's telling is funny, you know, the people have been laughing because it was like the caricature of the reality. And Kieślowski suddenly felt that he manipulated this man, that he used this man, that this man is maybe like that, but he doesn't know that he's like that. And he offered him his trust, and he used his trust to make him laughable, or the symbol of some regime, you know, something like that. And so he had the real, you know, moral conflict there, and it was for him, I think, very important reason to stop doing documentaries, because he was not happy with doing documentaries as a pure and very, you know, tender and transparent description of the reality and following the heroes as they are. But he was done with this kind of the approach, stylistic approach and narrative approach. And in the same time, going further into the composition and you know, manipulation, he felt that he doesn't have the rights to do it with the real people. Mm-hmm. So it was, you know, it was the turning point for sure, this documentary. But mm-hmm. It's still a very good documentary.
Yeah, it's very good. I have questions we have some questions from the audience that I will pass you now. Victoria asks, my question to Agnieszka, do you think that the period of the 70s and the 80s helped to give birth to brighter and deeper movies than today?
That we did deeper movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, you know, but I'm not objective. I was young and not blasé and very sensitive to everything I watched. So I thought that they've been better period for the movies, yeah. But probably objectively it was. 70s, 60s, 70s, still 80s, and after it started to a little go down.
And another question from Andrew. How do you develop ideas for your films? What is more important for you, a character or a story itself? And maybe I can complete the question a bit because a lot of your films were inspired by real events. Mr. Jones, Charlatan, Europa, and many others. Was fiction for you always an obvious choice, or did you consider at some point documentary as a possible approach?
No, you know, I never wanted to do documentaries. I did some documentations on some people or something when I became political immigrant in Paris, and I wanted to, you know, to document some important artistic or political figure from Polish immigration. I was afraid that they will die, and it will be not like, you know, the recollection, the documentary about them. So it's only documentaries I did, apart of what I did in the film school as a duty, which wasn't the like classical documentaries either. So no, I knew from the beginning that I want to have the control over the material I'm doing, that, you know, and that it has to be that being invented, it gives me the space of freedom much bigger. Probably what Kieślowski felt after, you know, by the end of 70s, I felt from the beginning that my nature is not, I could imagine to make fake documentaries. And at some point I was thinking I had 1 or 2 projects like that, but not the real documentaries.
And to come back to this concept of cinema of moral anxiety, and maybe to link it with the present, you never stopped making committed films about very powerful subjects, the Holocaust, the Holodomor, the repression in Communist Poland. Do you think that cinema of moral anxiety is still relevant now, and why?
I think that now is again probably the period for the courageous analysis of our social and political situation and global situation as well. And I think that the filmmakers, especially those who are doing fiction, are not brave enough, and it means very few of them are cutting, you know, straight and deep into the flesh of the reality, that they are rather lyrical or a bit escaping from you know, from the challenges. And it's maybe the weakness of the today's cinema comes from the comfort zone, where the filmmakers are living in some kind of the bubble. Documentary filmmakers not, they are, and it's why, you know, it's in our days mostly documentaries are most interesting among, you know, among the production. At least it's more interesting documentaries than really interesting fiction films. At least it's my opinion.
Okay, and I have other questions coming. 2 questions actually about Mr. Jones' release. So the first question is about the fact that Mr. Jones had a theatrical release in 2 countries, including Ukraine, I think, just at the beginning of the pandemic. How do you feel about the release, and how do you assess in general the release of Mr. Jones in Europe and in the world?
Well, we've been, you know, we had some luck and some misluck. The film was open in the few countries first, in Poland, in Ukraine, exactly, under the name of Ciena Prawdy. And after in few countries and in UK, and the releases have been not bad, but not great. And the next one was in France and in the US. In France, it's supposed to happen in March last year. And I did quite wide promotion for this one, and it looked very. Wait a moment, I have to check something.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Just waiting for Agnieszka reminding that you can watch the retrospective of Krzysztof Kieślowski's films, documentary films in Docudays. Welcome back.
Anyway, you know, 3 days before Mr. John's supposed to be released in France, the lockdown came. But the distributors, so during all the lockdown, 3 months, the posters of Mr. John's have been hanging in entire Paris, alone, you know, empty. And they cinemas opened by the end of June, and Mr. John's became #1 among new movies. So it was very successful in France, critically and also in terms of the box office. And in US, they opened it on several platforms, and it was very successful there as well. It means it did much more of sales that we ever expected. So I think that slowly this film is growing. I think it will stay in the libraries of different you know, platforms for quite a long time. It opened now on Netflix in Poland, and it is very regarded as well. So I'm not disappointed. I'm very happy about, especially about French and US territory.
Yeah, let's hope that the distribution of in cinema and the festivals will be possible in the big screens very soon. And maybe you have a last question to come back to the retrospective. Watching these movies, I felt that there are, of course, we could divide Kieślowski's career into very distinct parts, the documentary one and the fiction one. But I felt that eventually it's a very coherent ensemble where the moral sense, the universality of the feelings are present both in the fiction films and also were already there in the documentary periods. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Agnieszka, for being with us
Thank you.
For curating this retrospective, this very interesting program.
I hope that you, the audience, will enjoy those documentaries and that you'll find them modern and inspiring. And I'm happy that I was able in this way to honor the memory of my friend.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.